Standing by. The Terry and Ted podcast is sponsored by Jaguar Land Rover Laval. Get out of the big city and experience a construction zone free test drive. There is such a thing.
Good day, boys.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I have been struggling with how do we open a podcast, because for 35 plus years, when I sat in front of a microphone, the first thing I would say is, good morning, it's Tuesday morning, and
or the Spirit of Rock, show 'em 97.7, there's Elton John or whatever, Well, this is so loosey-goosey. That's what I like about it.
It is.
Yeah, you get your cue from the producer, and you go, how the fuck are you? Good to see you.
How's she going? It is episode number 8.
It's hard to believe that we've done 8 episodes already until you count them, and then it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
There were 7 before this, and now there's this one, and that makes 8. It's math.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the all-time overused expressions. I can't believe it's already Thursday. Well, if you look at the calendar, yesterday was Wednesday and tomorrow's Friday, so it kind of adds up when you sit down and really think about it. It's not that hard to believe at all.
Remember our very short-lived round of Match Game?
Yes.
When I did blank day. And was it you or Patty that said?
Patty.
Patty? She said?
Wednes.
I think that was 35 years ago.
Well, it was about 30 years ago.
I still do it.
Boy, did we laugh.
Yeah, I still say, well, not bad for a 2S.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey? Yeah. Which reminds me of what you showed me yesterday.
Can't wait for Saturn.
Yeah.
Yes, yesterday I was showing Terry, and this went viral on social media. I guess whenever it happened, quite a while ago. Steve, what's his last name? Who hosts Family Feud?
That guy with the thing.
Oh, I should know his last name. Steve
Thank
Harvey.
you.
Yeah.
Hey, Poseidon. Thank you.
So the thing is name something that comes after pork.
Right.
And the woman who's up at the buzzer says loin, and it takes him a few minutes to figure that out because she goes, loin! And he goes, huh? He's so good.
Yeah, he's very talented,
he's
very funny.
So his delivery and his body language is so good. So that family decides to play, and so he goes to the first guy in line. There's a kid, maybe 20, 21 years old. He's, name something that comes after pork. And the kid goes, cupine. And Steve Harvey goes, huh? And then he does the slow turn to the camera and he goes, name something that comes after pork. He said, cupine. And then he turns around and goes, what is cupine? And the kid, to his credit, he basically panicked. He couldn't think of anything. And he laughs along with it. He takes it in stride.
That's what reminded me of Wednes.
Yeah.
We used to play. We used to have fun, as we were saying on previous podcasts. When we were doing a radio program, we did not rehearse.
No.
And we did everything live, and that is quite apparent with the podcast.
It is, yeah. Well, listen. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And if people liked it then hopefully they're on board now still.
One of the things that I liked about our time on the radio, Ted, was we were complete goofballs for the most part, but we had our moments, and I brought with me a sense of that was drilled into me when I first got into the business by my great and good friend Don Percy in Winnipeg. That the chair you sat in came with a responsibility to the community, and that you had to do what you could to give back and to help. And I always took that really, really seriously. And over the years, you and I, both separately and ensemble, have again, I sound like we're blowing smoke up our own arse, but we tried to help a lot of different charities. With our chairs.
Well, we never said no if we were approached by a good cause, and that's just part of the job.
Yeah, I think so
me.
too.
We didn't do it, for recognition or anything.
God,
what do they say about? I'm part of a fellowship where it's drilled into you. Go out and do somebody a good favor, and then don't tell anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And
the spirit of charity is anonymous.
As the years went by, I think we got a reputation as people that never said no. So we got a lot of requests from
Yeah.
people who wanted to drop by, and I think that radio. I don't know if it still does. I don't think it does it like it used to. But radio used to be very, very good at giving back to the community, and I wanted to be part of that. And as a matter of fact, I think it's kind of a sign of an unwritten responsibility that you not only reflect the community you're in, but you give back. And,
For sure.
You know,
Well, I think everybody should do that regardless of
I agree
of their position and their profession. But
Yeah.
I think that because we have a platform that
Yeah.
allows us to help people,
Yeah.
Allows us to go the extra mile, then I think the onus is, I think there's that much more of an onus on us to help.
I think we started with the Missing Children's Network,
Yeah.
and there was juvenile diabetes, and there was Big Brothers Big Sisters.
I'm doing Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Are you?
Well, it'll be by the time this is on the air.
Yeah.
Terry and I were talking today about how different this
Yeah,
game is.
yeah,
You
it's
know,
an
the
effort.
podcast
Yeah.
game versus radio. This isn't going to go on the air by the time this is posted.
Yeah.
I will already have been one of the judges at Ribfest, Montreal Ribfest. They call me every year.
Do they?
Yeah, and they don't even complete the sentence. Hi, it's Ribfest. Would you like? Yes, I would. I would like that very much. What time do you need me to be there?
Yeah.
And that supports the Big Brothers and Big Sisters of the West Island.
And it comes with the perk of many, many different varieties of ribs.
It sure does, yeah. All of which I'm wearing by the time I leave.
Yeah, ribs, not a good first date
No.
meal, eh? You go on a first date and order the full rack?
Can I see you? No,
Yeah.
you can't see me again. It's over.
By the way, I found a great method for if you go on a date and you order ribs.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so what you got to do is you got to hold them down with a fork and you got to twist the bones and they come clean right off, and then you eat them like a steak, like a distinguished
Well, listen to
gentleman.
that.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, ladies' man.
So
eh?
you don't get the big clown
Exactly.
coating on your face.
That's Poseidon. He's our producer, and we would like to thank him. But we just learned before we started. We learned that we learned how to say thank you in Greek. He
Yes.
told us, and then we realized we couldn't say it. And he said, "Well, if you can't say it right, then I know you're not thankful." So, so we'll have to thank him in English or Italian or French. What is it again in Greek, Poseidon?
Ευχαριστώ.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a sneeze to me.
Bless you.
Actually, it does. I never realized. Ευχαριστώ.
Can I get you a handkerchief?
I never realized that. That's a funny.
It's true, eh?
That's a funny observation.
So you're still doing you're using the chair at Light 106 to do
100%, and
Good for you,
probably
Birdman. Good
probably
for
even
you.
more so because it's such a small
Yeah.
community, it's a small town that serves a larger region, and we get requests just about daily.
Wow.
Can you help us with this? Can you promote that?
Yeah.
And we're happy to jump on board because it helps the community and it helps make you part of the community.
Yeah, I think that's important. I always did. One of the things that we talked about today is your involvement, and I just kind of followed you around. Your involvement with your love of history, which led to your involvement and support of veterans of all stripes. No matter the conflict, everything from Bosnia to all the way back to WWL. You've had the
I think it's WWI.
right have been not only a keen student of history, but also a big supporter of the armed forces and veterans.
And I came by it honestly. My father who was a young boy in World War II, lost his uncle, his favorite uncle, who was Ted Williston. So I was named after him.
Oh, wow.
And my dad always had lots of books around the house, and I would read the books. I can remember being like 6 years old. My dad took me to war movies when I was just a little kid.
Wow.
Yeah, if he wanted to go to a war movie, he'd bring me along with him. I remember going to the Dirty Dozen when I was like 8.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah. How did you, because when I was a kid in Montreal, you couldn't get into those movies.
I don't know. I guess, well,
Wow.
Just because I was with my dad, I guess they let me in. And I had an occasion in 2005, and Poseidon has the picture. There's a picture there, Poseidon, of myself and my sons, Charlie and Sam, when they were 4 and 6 years old. And I love this picture.
Just a moment, gentlemen.
Yeah, we went to
One moment, please.
we went to the cemetery outside of Ortona, Italy, where my great uncle Ted is buried, and we went to his grave.
Yeah.
And
This picture makes me cry. I've seen
yeah,
this.
well,
I've seen this picture before.
it's a dandy. There it is. Look at the boys. Look at the body language. They understand that they're somewhere special, and that they're somewhere almost sacred. You know, they just
Well, it
get
is
it.
sacred.
Yeah,
It is. Yeah.
They just
How
get
old
it.
were the boys there, Ted?
Charlie was 4 in the yellow shirt, and Sam was 6, and I was fat.
It's just a bad angle.
I guess, yeah. Sam actually has that picture as part of his sleeve tattoo.
No kidding.
Yeah, Sam's pretty tatted up. He's got a lot of tattoos, and all of them have a family connection. Everything that he has inked onto his body
Right.
has some kind of sentimental family connection. He's got that as part of his sleeve. He's got the map of New Brunswick
Wow.
up on his, I think it's on his left, whatever you call that part of your chest
Right.
and shoulder. Everything he's got is family related.
Just over his tit.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
His tattoo.
What do you think it is with me, Ted? With family-run businesses, I just love a good family-run business.
I think it's because you're Italian.
Maybe.
I think it's the
Yeah,
Italian thing.
that could
Family,
be.
familia.
Familia. See. I have a real affinity in this day and age of, you go to a counter and you want to speak to somebody in charge and they have to send an email to Edmonton and you hear back in 10 days. I don't like any of that at all. I love it when families get passionate about something and they end up building a business from their love of that particular business. And that is the case at Matelas Bonheur. When I first went into a Matelas Bonheur store, I could almost tell right away. I went into the original store, which is on Gouin Boulevard in Saint-Geneviève, and I was almost taken aback by how wonderfully I was greeted, with a smile in both languages, and how can we help you? And the store was beautiful, and we got to talking, and somebody asked me a few questions about how I sleep, and do I like a firm mattress, and what kind of pillow do you have, and what do you prefer, and all of that stuff, standing in this beautiful store. And then they said, we're going to show you these 3 mattresses, and you let us know if you have any questions. So nobody sat with me. Nobody tried to pressure me to buy anything. It was just, I was taken with the way they run their business, and that's the way they built their business. There are now 18 locations across the greater Montreal area. And if you're thinking about a mattress, you want to deal with people like that, don't you?
Do you think they'd let me have a nap in the showroom as a means of trying out one of their mattresses?
If they weren't busy, Ted, I would venture to guess they probably would.
Because I could drop by after the show, and you know what it's like after
Yes.
a morning show. You've gotten up in the middle of the night. It's nap time.
Yeah.
I could swing by the closest location on my way home, have a little schluff,
Yep.
wipe up my drool, and be on my way.
By the way, while we're talking about that, they also have set up some really safe shopping, mattress testing. They've got covers and all kinds of protocols and everything else. And you've got to know that, by the way, you could stop at the original store in St. Genevieve.
Oh, there you go.
And right around the corner, you could get a hot dog at La Roulette. How about that? There are, let me see, I want to make sure that I get this right, 18 locations in the greater Montreal area. There's lots of places to buy a mattress, but if you're thinking about buying a mattress, don't do anything before you visit Matelas Bonheur, matelasbonheur.ca.
So anyway, yes, so I've always been interested in that, and over the years, got involved with the Black Watch. Did you ever do any remotes with me from the Black Watch, or was that? I think that was on the late Andre Mason. And I did a couple of remotes.
I didn't do remotes, but I went one year with you to the armory for the big Haggis dinner.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
What was that called?
That's
was
the Robbie Burns dinner
where they jump up on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot
they
of
don't jump
scotch.
up on the
Yeah.
table. It's part of the ceremony.
Yeah, it's a good piss up and bake sale.
Yeah,
that
it
night,
really is.
That night I sat beside, and oh my God, how can I not? Ivor Watkins. I sat beside Ivor Watkins, who was he was a Canadian who served in the British Royal Commandos, and he went to Normandy before D-Day. to clear obstacles, to recon the beaches. Like, he was on the beaches after dark before D-Day.
Wow.
And I recall him telling me a story kind of matter-of-factly and sort of regretfully about having to kill a German sentry or two. They were patrolling the beach, and he was, and he would have been found out, so he had to silently, with his knife, kill them, and he was, you could see the regret,
Right.
Right. But it was what he had to do. So the Black Watch I was involved in, one of the great things that I got to do was go to Bosnia after the war in Bosnia was over, but Canada was still implementing and stabilizing the peace treaty. So I went over there for 2 weeks and got to go around with the Canadian Army on their various patrols and stuff, which was absolutely fascinating. One of the interesting things about that was the Canadian Army field kitchens, the food at the Canadian Army field kitchens is better than the food you will get at most all-inclusive resorts.
Really?
It is so good. And I was told when I was there that the Canadians are well known for that, and that the other countries who were part of the NATO stabilization force, when they were on their patrols, they would try to time it so that at lunchtime or dinner time they were near a Canadian field kitchen,
right?
So that they could go eat the Canadian food.
And is that done? You can pop into whatever country's field kitchen you like, I suppose.
I guess if you're part of the NATO, if you're part of the alliance, they're all working together over there. So I got to do that, and then more lately, I was introduced by you to a gentleman named Steve Gregory, who's a Montreal businessman who works tirelessly on behalf of veterans past and present, living and dead, and he has a couple of organizations that I do social media for. One is called Respect Canada, which helps veterans who are dealing with and first responders, firemen, ambulance, police, who are dealing with PTSD and homelessness, which is a huge problem with veterans and first responders. So Steve does that, and then he has another organization called, and I've got the T-shirt on today.
Yeah, I
got
see
the
that
logo. It's called.
Hold on, I'm going to put the middle cam.
Okay, there you go.
Right,
Operation Husky.
Right above my tit. Operation Husky,
Thank you, Doctor.
which was the code name of the invasion of Sicily in 1943. And as with D-Day, it was the British, the Americans, and the Canadians who went ashore. And Steve, it's funny how this came about. Steve was hosting a veteran at dinner one night, and the veteran was telling Steve's son, sorry?
Do you want me to?
Give me a second, and we'll put those up. The veteran was telling Steve's son, Eric, this story about the Canadians in Sicily, and Steve thought it was a fascinating story and went to look it up and couldn't find anything on it.
Wow.
And very quickly came to realize that the Canadian effort in Sicily went largely, while it is a matter of the historical record, it was largely unrecognized. And so he thought, you know what, people have to recognize what happened in Sicily and the service and the sacrifice that Canadians performed in Sicily. And so he has organized Operation Husky 2013. He took a group to Sicily in 2013, which was the 75th anniversary. Am I doing the math right? Mm-hmm. Or is that the 70th anniversary? That's the 70th anniversary. And then he took a group in 2018, which was the 75th anniversary. I went on that trip. Yeah, you can pop those up there now if you want, Poseidon, those pictures. And we're going again in 2023. I also went in 2019. So you can see this is all Steve did all this. Right. Steve got all this done. This is in Pacino, where the Canadians landed. That's a monument to the Canadians that Steve organized, got it funded, got it built. Everybody in Sicily knows Steve Gregory. He knows every mayor.
The Italians were very cooperative, correct?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The Sicilians were, and you can keep going with those, Poseidon, if you want to go from one to the next. Yeah, they were really. There's Steve is on the left.
Okay.
I'm on the right.
Yes.
And the guy in the middle is Santino.
Uh-huh.
He's just a local guy in one of the towns, and every time that he hears that we're there. Him and I are Facebook friends. So if he sees me post and he knows we're in Sicily, he's right there in a flash. He also is a tuba player in an local Oompa band. So what we've done in the 2 trips that I've done is we've marched in the footsteps of the Canadians through Sicily, from where they landed all the way up into the middle of the island where they fought their final battle before chasing the Germans out. I was telling Poseidon beforehand, third from the right, the little girl with the curly hair, very popular with the Canadian soldiers.
I understand.
Yeah. She had to run away. They were just every one of them. Actually, she was enjoying the attention, of course, but yeah. So that's a group, and there's Santino again with his hat on. This is the cemetery. Wow. This is the cemetery at Agira. 591 Canadian graves. When Steve goes over there, the first thing he does is he goes to that cemetery and he walks the whole cemetery and does a roll call.
Wow.
Names every name out loud. Yeah.
That's a very powerful picture.
Yeah. It's a beautiful cemetery. I mean, I know that sounds like a contradiction in terms, but it's any Commonwealth cemetery, Canadian military cemetery I've been to, and there's another picture. You'll see the view from this cemetery. Oh, wow. That was during a ceremony where they had we found a person or organized one person to stand at each grave. So we had 591 people there, and they did a roll call, and each person answered for whichever the name of the soldier at the grave that they were at. And as you can see, we had Canadian soldiers who came over with us on that trip. But look at the view in the background.
I do. I see that. Yeah.
It's quite stunning. So 591, I think it's 591 graves. 591. There's a nice 591 Canadian graves. And it's something that, like, we all know about Normandy. We all know about the Battle of Britain.
This is where your uncle lost his life. No,
he was not. He was not killed in Sicily. He landed in Sicily,
right?
And
wasn't he taken shortly before the end of the war?
No. He died on New Year's Eve, 1943.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's the beach. That's Pechino there. Okay. No, he landed in Sicily, so that would have been July of 1943, and he was killed New Year's Eve, 1943. So he actually made it through 6 months of combat, which was almost unheard of. Yeah. You know, the casualty rate was such that, you know, your number came up fairly quickly.
It just occurred to me that it's kind of like when you invite people over and get the slide projector.
That's true, eh? I think that's interesting stuff, though. I might be wrong, and I also think
I wanted to talk about.
Yeah. I also think it's, those guys deserve it.
I agree.
And I was talking about Ivor Watkins. Terry and I have had the occasion to meet a number of veterans over the years. Most of them are gone now, of course. We were. I don't know if it was last episode or one before, we were doing the math. Not us, anyone who landed on D-Day at the age of 20 would now be 98. So most of them are gone. About 20 years ago when we were on CJD, we had moved back over to Shome. And we decided, let's get a veteran in, and we'll talk to him about D-Day. Who can we get? So I called whoever, and I said, I need a D-Day veteran. Call Oakle Stewart in St. Lambert. Okay. He's great. And he used to be on CJD every Remembrance Day. So I called Oakle, and I got his answering machine back in the days of answering machines. And I left him a message, and I'm Ted Bird from Shome FM. We'd like to have you on to talk about D-Day, if you can call me back. So the next day or whenever it was, I get a message from him. I was not available, and he left me a message. And he goes, "Yes, Mr. Bird, this is Oakle Stewart speaking. I understand you wanted to talk to me about World War II, which I won with the help of others." And then we had him in, and
what a character!
And a remarkable interview. Yeah. And what I remember about him and other veterans from that era, they were almost taken aback when you thanked them.
Yeah.
Like they were almost not embarrassed, but they were, I was just doing what
just doing my job.
Yeah, we did what we had to do. Do you remember the time we went up to Ottawa and watched the Spitfire fly past?
I do.
And the same thing happened. I remember you went over to there were a group of pilots, veteran pilots of World War II, and you went over and thanked them, and you came back over to me and you said they weren't sure how to handle that when I thanked them. They were kind of like, okay.
Yeah. Because as a kid, I remember going to the movie theater that was in the Chateau Champlain downtown and watching the Battle of Britain with school. in the days when, I don't know if they still do this, but a school field trip was to go see the Battle of Britain. And I think I was in grade 7. And I was so taken with, the story of it, because it was, in grade 7, I don't know how old you are, but that's where you begin, or where I began to learn that literally the free world was at stake during the Battle of Britain. And I was completely taken with the Spitfires. And the day that we went all those years later to Ottawa, when that Spitfire did that flyby, I was doing the World War II cry, the old, I'm not crying, because the thing shot over at a low altitude, and the rumble of that engine, and I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, And I like you, during Remembrance Day, and I know because of COVID, there hasn't been much of that lately. I used to like to buy a bunch of poppies from a bunch of different locations, and always would extend my hand to thank the veteran, and they get all flustered.
Yeah, they don't know how to handle that.
Well,
that generation, man.
Yeah.
They grew up in the Depression.
Yeah.
And the payoff was you get to go to war.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, we had a hard Scrabble childhood. Now what?
Yeah.
Well, the good news is you're getting a free trip to Europe.
Yeah.
The bad news is you got to dodge U-boats on the way.
I remember you telling me one year that you were going, I said, what are you doing with your holidays this year, Birdman? I'm going to Bosnia. What? I said, there's a war on, right?
No, the war was over by then.
Was it over by then?
It's crazy because today's generation, they complain because they say, due to the stars, I'm a freaking avocado this month. So my fucking stars are in my asshole. So this is why I get to act like a bitch.
Well, the difference is, for that generation, a safe space was also known as a foxhole.
Exactly.
Yeah. And a trigger warning was incoming. Yeah. Honest to good God, eh?
Different times.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, what do they say? They say hard times make strong men. Strong men make good times. Good times make soft men. So it's a cycle that keeps repeating itself. And I think you can probably guess which part of the cycle we're in now. Although I would like to think that, if home and country were under siege, I would like to think that most people in the combat age generation would answer the call. I know that not everybody would, but I know my boys would.
Yep.
I know my boys' friends would.
Yep.
I think when I think when it comes right down to it, when everything you love and cherish is under threat, I would like to think that they would take a stand. The free trip to Europe thing reminds me of a great story. One of the veterans who I had the great privilege of knowing was Jerry Forbes' stepfather. Jerry Forbes is an iconic Canadian radio broadcaster like yourself, recently inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame. And Jerry grew up in Toronto and was raised by his stepfather and his mom. His stepfather was Mike Sheehy. Mike landed on D-Day in a tank and always said he was glad that he was in a tank when he landed on D-Day, as he was looking around watching the fire that the infantry was taking. Anyway, he was in combat for a few weeks, and then his tank got hit, and the lower half of one of his legs was blown off. And he came home and got fitted with a prosthetic. And Jerry's brother Marty loves to tell the story. Until the day Mike died, whenever a woman walked into the room, he was the first man on his feet.
Wow.
Prosthetic leg and all.
Wow.
Again, that generation.
Yeah.
But Mike had a son, Jerry's brother Neil, and I used to go over to their house with Jerry, and we'd sit around and we'd have a few drinks, and I would always pepper Mike with questions and he would, he'd talk to me because he knew I was interested in World War II history. So, and he wasn't a bragger, but he was typical of those guys. I'm no hero.
Yeah.
But then he'd tell you a story, and he was a great storyteller. And so I would sit there and I'd listen to his stories all day long. And Neil would come out of the house and he'd look at us and he'd go, "Talking about your free trip to Europe again, eh, Dad?" But nobody loved and respected Mike more than Neil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got any fart jokes?
Not a one, sir.
I just realized what we've been talking about is, but that's the way we started. I wanted to talk about the fact that we love a good fart joke like anybody else, but we took the other part of our job seriously.
Yes, very much so, and continue to. I mean, I have some ideas for guests on this show that can go down the history rabbit hole, but I think we can also, it doesn't all have to be grave and serious and sad. I think we just told some funny stories about the veterans.
Right.
I think they were funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, they cracked us up. Anybody else wants to come along for the ride, you're more than welcome.
Ted, you know what I like is when we used to work together, you used to do the I feel it change in the air.
Yeah, it was the bear thing.
Yeah, you'd come in the morning and you'd say, "Oh, I felt it this morning," and I'd say, "Damn it, no, it's too early for that." But it's in the air.
Yeah, it's time.
Yeah,
it's time. It's what I think a bear must do every year when he realizes or she realizes it's time to think about hibernating.
Right.
So when I go, I know it's time to think about winter tires.
Right. Bears don't think about that.
No, I don't think so. No. So when I would think about winter tires, and maybe bears do too, I'm not sure, I think about Merson.
Our friends at the Mersons.
Merson Automotive. Yeah. You and I have been going to Merson for, 25 years now or so? Yeah.
I used to take my horse and carriage there.
Oh, yeah, back in the day. Yeah. You know, they have an outlet in Pennsylvania now, Mersons of Pennsylvania, where they do only wagons. That might not be true.
Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, they take care of Montrealers.
Yeah, it's a family-run business, and one of the things that I love for years is going into the waiting room and you'd see the same faces in the spring and the fall, and that's because families have come to trust them. You and I have both had this experience. I was introduced to them over 25 years ago when I got ripped off at a mechanic's place, and a friend of mine said, "You should take it to the Mersons. They're as honest the day as the day is long." And I said, "Who are the Mersons?" And at the time, it was Mark and Bonnie, and we met Mark and Bonnie and became very good friends. And now there's a new generation, Kara and Celso, are running the shop. But all of the same standards and traditions of honesty and integrity are still there, along with a lot of employees that have been there.
I was going to say, not just the same faces of clients in the waiting room, but also the same faces behind the counter and in the back as well, back in the mechanic bays. And that speaks volumes about a business when you have continuity of staff.
Yeah, and simple things like an oil change, no problem. You need a tune-up, no problem. Your Fritzinator's gone, no problem.
If you're leaking oil and they need your car for 2 days, big problem. Not for them, they'll fix it, but problem for all of that to say, that's where my car is right now.
Okay, there you go.
But you want to talk about the trustworthy thing. It's a big job, and it's going to take some money out of my pocket, but I have a 10-year-old car, and 10-year-old cars need big jobs sometimes, and I know I can trust them. When Celso told me what the problem was and gave me the estimate, I didn't question him on it because I know that they're not going to rip me off. They're going to do what needs to be done.
Do the math. You take that to another place, and it's twice the price. 487-5545 or mersonauto.com. Okay.
What do you got? Poseidon, it seems like we're all out.
I don't think we're out. It's just
it's a hard thing to segue from.
It is. Too old. I was just sitting here thinking, two old professionals like us should be able to transition away from that. I mean, we transitioned from Coupon to World War II and people being shot on the beach.
Yeah. He said Coupon. What is Coupon?
Speaking of Steve Harvey and Family Feud, I love watching the best of.
The best of? Is this something we should be...
The best of a Family Feud.
Okay.
On YouTube.
Yeah.
They basically take all the best and funniest moments of Family Feud and they kind of clip them together. I love watching that shit. I go crazy.
He really knows how to run with it, eh?
Yeah.
He's so good at that. Well, he's a radio broadcaster.
And you know what? There's another show. There's another example of a high wire act I mean, I know it's live to tape, as they call. They, if somebody goes, fuck, they can stop tape.
Yeah.
But they live in the moment on that show, which is, I think, the nature of at least part of the appeal of that show, which is, that somebody will say cupine or, Wednes.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, well,
we've been talking about that's what we did.
Yeah, and the best moments are born of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it falls flat.
Yeah.
And sometimes it flies. And
Yeah.
when it flies, boy, can it soar.
And I remember having those conversations with bosses of ours who would, you and I, over the course of the years, were encouraged a number of times to plan things the day before, pre-tape everything, pre-tape your phone callers. Like, take your phone callers off the air, pre-tape it, edit the tape to make it sound sharp.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was just such a stupid idea.
Yeah.
Because real life don't work that way.
No, I mean, you know what? For some guys, that might fit their style.
Yeah, some guys do really well with it.
Yeah, but that's not what we did, and it's not what we do.
Yeah, it's the same thing with guests. I used to love to have guests in the studio, and I was encouraged a number of times to have guests come in after we got off the air, tape it, and then just, shorten it and clip it because nobody's interested, blah, blah, blah. And I've had some guests walk into the studio who were scheduled to stay for 10 minutes and stayed the whole show. I don't know if you remember the morning Bob Rock came in?
Yes, I do.
Bob Rock is one of the most famous record producers in the world and has done some massive, massive projects. Made enough money from these massively successful albums that he has his own chunk of a Hawaiian island with a satellite dish specifically aimed at a certain satellite so we can watch hockey on Saturday nights.
That's great.
He's just a fascinating guy and has produced so many great albums, including Metallica's so-called Black Album, their most successful album, and the album that introduced them to a wider audience, an album that took them from, just the metalheads to a massive mass appeal audience.
And the metalhead purists were pissed off about it,
yes,
right?
yeah.
And didn't someone come into the studio
one of them worked at our
sister station.
At our sister station and invited himself into the studio, which is this is another thing about that people don't know about. When you're in the studio, if you're a radio guy,
it's your house.
When you're in the studio, it's your house. Nobody's allowed to come in without asking. This is the way I was taught anyway. Yeah. Nobody's allowed to come in the studio without asking. Nobody's allowed to touch your board. In other words, reach over you and move something on the
control board.
It would be like me going over there and telling Poseidon what to do.
Yeah.
You don't do that. And certainly when you have company, piss off. And during a break in this morning where Bob Rock just kept talking and telling these amazing stories, Mike came into the studio and said, "I just came in to tell you you ruined Metallica." And to me, that was like if you invited people to your house for dinner and your kids said to them, I don't want you here.
Yeah, I don't like you.
Yeah, I don't like you. Yeah.
I don't remember what Bob Rock's reaction was, but I remember
it was gracious.
Yeah, that much I remember because if there had been a confrontation or if he'd taken it poorly, I would have remembered that. I also remember about his visit, and I always felt good about this because it said to me, maybe I know something about music, maybe I have a good ear. But I said to him, I always thought that Aerosmith did better music when they were still drinking and doing drugs. And he went, yes! And he said, tell my wife that. Get Your Wings, Toys in the Attic, and Rocks, I think, are Aerosmith's three best albums. And they sobered up after that. And they did a lot of good records after that,
Yeah,
and
they did.
and probably had their most commercial success after that.
Well-
but those 3 albums really rocked.
That was another, the second act for Aerosmith was produced at the hands of another Canadian producer named Bruce Fairbairn. And Bruce Fairbairn and Bob Rock worked out of the Vancouver area, and a lot of great records came out of that era. Bruce Fairbairn produced Bon Jovi, Loverboy, Metallica, Bon Jovi, Loverboy. Like I think a Bryan Adams record. He did a lot of work, and Bob Rock also with Metallica and a host of others that I can't remember without looking at Wikipedia, but he was one of the most prolific and talented producers in music, and had come in that morning and said I don't know why, I think he was in town producing somebody, and he said, yeah, I'll come in for, I'm going to be up early, I'll come in for 20 minutes. And he stayed till, I was there for 2.5 hours, I think.
Yeah, well, that's testament to you and your interview skills, and the fact that he found you as interesting as you found him.
Oh, wow.
That was great. Who's Bruce Allen?
Bruce Allen is to Vancouver what Donald K. Donald was to Montreal.
Oh, okay, so he's a promoter.
He was a
an impresario.
Impresario, promoter, and also later in life, a manager.
That's what I thought.
He manages Jan Arden. He managed Anne Murray. He managed Bachman Turner Overdrive. He manages. There's a host of them that are not coming to me.
Reason I ask is I know a guy named Ghislain Arsenault. Ghislain owns a company called Truck and Roll.
Right.
And Truck and Roll is one of the biggest concert transportation companies in the world. They move bands around on tour. They move Cirque du Soleil around on tour.
Wow.
And they move Celine around on tour. In fact, the song My Heart Will Go On, at the time, before My Heart Will Go On, he was using 3 trucks to move Celine. Mm-hmm. After that song came out, René Angelot called him up and said, "You're going to need a bigger fleet." They went from 3 trucks to 20 trucks to move Celine.
Yeah. Wow, what a cool story.
So yeah, and Ghislain's a great guy, and I actually host a podcast for Truck and Roll, and he was my first guest. And despite the fact that I called him Ghislain Dufour and his name is Ghislain Arsenault, he didn't fire me. He kept me on board. But he told a story about Bruce Allen.
Yes.
And he said that he met Bruce Allen at some backstage after party after a concert. And Bruce Allen said, "Who are you?" And Ghislain said, "I'm Ghislain Arsenault. I own Truck and Roll." And he goes, "Well, I've never heard of you, so that means you haven't fucked up."
That's Bruce Allen. He's known as a brusque, like all of those managers are. They're brusque and quick to anger, and huge defenders of their artists.
Yeah.
Which is what makes them great managers.
Yeah, well, Donald is not a shrinking violet, is he?
No,
Donald
he's
K.
not.
Donald.
No, if you spend time with Donald and he talks about the early days of concert promoting, he'll tell you some great stories about some of the entanglements he had with Led Zeppelin's manager, Elton John's manager. Those were the days when you had to. Elton John would have to get John Reed managed Elton John, so Donald would get on the phone with John Reed. And they would have a nice conversation, and John would say, "We're doing a tour," and then they would start screaming at each other about what it was going to cost, how much it was going to cost Donald to bring Elton John to Montreal.
Right. And
they would have a handshake on it, and settle up after the show. Cash would change hands. Then they go to dinner. It was the old-fashioned way to do business in the concert business.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think that's my hat's off to guys like that, guys who can knock heads in business, and then when the business is done, they can sit down and be friends. There's a lot to be said for that.
And we'll talk on future episodes. We'll talk more about behind the scenes in the music business, because I've got a lot of nice things to say about Donald K. Donald, who was incredibly kind to me over the years. and actually provided me with some really good counsel over the course of my career.
You know who would have been a great guest on this show if you want to end it with a good cry?
Yes.
Because we haven't cried yet. We came close a couple of times during the veterans thing, but we haven't cried yet. Terry and I lost a great and good friend a few months ago, Warren Skip Snare.
Yeah.
And Skip worked with us in radio for a long time, and he was behind the scenes in the music business. And his claim to fame was rescuing a Rolling Stones concert. I don't know the details. You probably know them better than me.
The Rolling Stones came to town in, I don't remember the year, but it was, I think...
It was 72.
Yeah, it was late 60s, early 70s. And it was a very political time in Quebec. And the trucks, speaking of trucks that carry stuff, that were holding the equipment for the Stones were parked near the Forum overnight. Somebody put a bomb under the truck and blew the truck up. And so they didn't have any PA stuff. And it was, the show was that night, or the night it was going to be that night, or the sorry, Skip, I'm not telling the story very well. But they needed amplification equipment, and fast. And Skip stepped forward and managed to find stuff to rent, which was difficult at that time of the year because I think it was the summertime.
This is how resourceful and connected Skip was.
Right.
Yeah.
Got in touch with somebody at Air Canada because he found this stuff, I think it was in the Maritimes in Halifax, had a shipment of lobster, fresh lobster, bumped off the flight. The Air Canada flight had the lobster removed, the amplification equipment put on the plane. The stuff arrived in Montreal that afternoon. He arranged for trucks to get it to the Montreal Forum, and that night the Stones went on stage. And when the Stones manager asked how that happened, they were introduced to Skip. Skip and Keith Richards became great and good friends, and Skip went on the road with them. And one of my favorite stories of Skip being on the road with the Stones was they were in Toronto for the El Macombo show. It's a famous show at a famous club in Toronto. And he was in Keith's room, and Keith would not stop playing the same riff over and over and over again. And I think the riff, sorry, Skip, I think the riff was...
Start Me Up, the opening lick for Start Me Up. Yeah. So they hadn't written it yet. He was just screwing around with it.
Apparently, Keith Richards was on the bed going over and over and over again. And Skip, I think, was trying to watch a hockey game. And he went, Keith, for fuck's sake.
And if you know Skip, Skip didn't give a shit if it was Keith Richards or the Queen of England.
Try to watch the game, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
Skip would tell that story and say, I nearly ruined that. Right?
That song.
To Miss You.
That's funny. Yeah. Tell it's not one specific story, but I used to love the way Skip would move people along at Ziggy's.
Oh yeah.
If a drunk came over to your table and started talking your guy's ear off.
Yeah. Skip was not very tolerant of the people who were impolite or
invasive.
Invasive.
It's one thing to say, "Hey, hi, how are you doing?"
Yeah.
Just wanted to say, "Hi, nice to meet you," and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And Skip would keep an eye on us. And one of the reasons that people love to go when Skip was bartending, one of the reasons they loved to go to the bar was they knew Skip ran a tight ship. Right, you didn't try and steal from him, you didn't try and run out on your bill, and you certainly, if Tim Wallach or Bob Gainey was in the bar, you didn't bother them, you left them be. And Skip had an interesting way of keeping an eye on people, and if he would watch, and if somebody would come over, and oftentimes if you have a public profile, oftentimes people use alcohol for courage to come over, and when they come over, they get pretty.
Well, they don't know when to. They don't know when time's up.
Yeah, Skip would come over and just lightly tap them on the hand and just go, "Your time's up, pal. Your time's up. You've taken enough time. On you go. Away you go.
You're done here. You're done.
You're done.
Yeah,
you're done."
here. My favorite Skip story, after he had moved from the Rolling Stones and bartending and come into radio where he was doing promotions and marketing, we had a boss, best boss I ever worked for, Rob Braid. And Rob was a very slick dresser.
Yes.
Rob dressed extremely well. He was one of the best dressed men in Montreal, a real clothes horse. And I don't know if Rob knows that Skip called him Fancy Pants.
Yeah.
That was Skip's name for Rob, was Fancy Pants. After Rob retired and a new general manager came in, I remember standing outside the general manager's office one day, and Skip was in there trying to, I don't know if he was trying to get money for a promotion or he was, anyway, I don't know. Skip had a meeting with the guy, and Skip came back out of the office, and I was standing beside the secretary's desk. Skip came out of the office, and he walked past me, and still looking straight ahead and without breaking stride, he went, "This fucking guy's worse than Fancy."
We love them, and boy, do we miss them.
They'll
be, as long as we keep doing this podcast, that's not the last Skip story you've heard. That's for sure.
Well, that's it. Yeah, and he was a great guy, old Skip. Yes. Time to tell you a little bit about our title sponsors at Jaguar Land Rover Laval. I was up there the other day because I had to reluctantly return the Jaguar F-Type P380 Sports Coupe that they loaned to Terry and me to drive around for the weekend. The last time we recorded some of these podcast episodes. What a beautiful, beautiful car. Goes like stink, too. And that's why I had to also inform them that when they get the photo radar ticket, that'll be for me. Just forward that to me. Actually, I don't think it's going to be that bad, but no. I did see a flash when I was going across the Ilotort Bridge in the middle of the night, so that can only mean one thing. Now, when I went back up there to return the car, I was talking to Nino Di Cubelis, who is the president and owner of Jaguar Land Rover Laval, along with his brother Renato. Nino was telling me Jaguar races in the E series. You know what I mean? The electric cars.
I do.
They look like Formula One cars, but they're electric cars. Jaguar has a team. You know who one of their drivers is?
No.
Sam Bird.
No.
Yeah.
You're kidding.
Yeah, not my son, Sam Bird.
Oh, okay.
but a Sam Bird nonetheless. If any of the Birds were going to be race car drivers, it would have been Charlie.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, if I was a billionaire, Charlie Bird would be driving in Formula One right now.
Yeah, he is to say he's a master of automobiles would be a bit of an understatement. When they when Jaguar Land Rover Laval gives you an F-Type for the weekend, it's a good news, bad news kind of deal, Ted? Because the good news is I got an F-Type Jaguar for you for the weekend. The bad news is you got to bring it back.
Yeah, but you know what? You may as well be grateful for the 2 or 3 days that we had it. What a spectacular vehicle. And it doesn't matter what kind of Jaguar you get yourself into. It's high-end luxury and pretty good bang for the buck on a comparative level. That F-Type is a spectacular sports coupe. That's a top-of-the-line sports coupe, and you can get into that for under 6 figures. And I know a lot of people are going, well, yeah, but you know what? There is a market for those cars.
Yeah.
There are people who can afford those cars, and under 6 figures is a really good deal for a vehicle that beautiful.
And as I said to you when I was sitting in it, it's beautifully designed, an absolutely beautiful design for a sports car. And of course, when you're at the dealership, you could also wander over and have a look at the Land Rovers too.
And Jaguar Land Rover Laval does it right at every level. They have a spectacular product and they have spectacular service. And that starts at the top with Nino and Renato and goes all the way down. They have family who work there, and it's a family-run business. And they'll treat you like family when you go in there. They treat their staff like family. Well, that's because some of their staff are family. But even the ones who aren't family get treated like family. And you will be too when you go to Jaguar Land Rover Laval. They're on Carrefour, corner of Chomedy in Laval. That's where the new car dealership is. For the certified pre-owned and McLaren Montreal, you're just a little bit south of there on Chomedy Boulevard. Go up just to have a look. They'd be fine pleased to show you their spectacular lineup of vehicles. And I suppose you could ask for a spot of tea because they are British luxury vehicles. With Nino and Renato, you're probably better off asking for an espresso. They can probably round that up for you a lot quicker than a spot of tea.
You can also visit them online, of course. Visit
LandRoverLaval.ca or JaguarLaval.ca. We got to go. Poseidon's got to get a haircut. He's going to be late. Yeah,
That's right. Oh, shit. Sorry.
Not much
man.
hair, but
Yeah, okay. Well, we want you looking good for the ladies, Poseidon.
Yes.
Poseidon Santorini.
Yeah. Mushtaklov.
Mushkala.
What was
That's
it again?
terrible, eh?
sorry.
Yeah, thank you again. What was
Oh,
it?
Efcharisto.
Acharisto.
Sucrose. Glucose. Fructose.
Hey, this has been a lot of fun, Birdman.
You want to do another one?
I do. Thank you, by the way, for squiring me around all weekend long.
Listen,
I appreciate
it was my
that.
pleasure.
Yeah.
If we do this again, what we've done is we've recorded a bunch in a few days. If we do that again,
Yes.
I'll see if I can get us a McLaren to drive around town.
Okay, fantastic.
Don't hold your breath, but I'll
No.
see what I can do.
Standing By, the Terry and Ted podcast, is sponsored by Jaguar Land Rover Laval, where the luxury is unmistakably British. But nobody wears a top hat or a monocle